Your body walks, but your spirit limps. You laugh with friends, hit deadlines, and post your wins. But deep inside, there's a silence that won't shut up. A part of you keeps asking, is this it? You look fine, successful, even. People admire your strength, but they don't see the toll. They don't feel the weight you carry just to stay standing. They can't hear the scream behind your smile. Some days, you speak your truth. But even then, something inside edits your words, softens them, censors them, makes them safer. That's not weakness. That's ego, stepping in like a nervous translator, always trying to protect you, but also stopping you. There's a reason you feel stretched thin, disconnected, like you're made of pieces that don't quite fit together. That's because you are. You're not just a body, not just a mind, not even just a soul. You're a layered being, a living system made of 4 deep, distinct centers of power. 4 thrones. The body, the ego, the spirit, and the soul. Each one shapes how you think, feel, act, and see the world. Each one pulls you in a different direction. And most people live their entire lives without even knowing these thrones exist, let alone understanding how to balance them. Some confuse ego for spirit, chasing validation, thinking it's purpose. Others mistake the body's instincts for the voice of the soul. And when you don't know which throne is speaking, your life starts to feel like noise. Like you're chasing things that never satisfy, avoiding things that might heal you, and silencing parts of yourself that hold the truth. But what if you could see them clearly? What if you could hear each voice, separately? Could the pieces of you start working together? That's what this journey is about. To remember, to realign, to rise. This isn't about escaping the world. It's about living in it fully, but from the inside out. With awareness, with power, with a quiet kind of wholeness that can't be faked or bought. We're going to walk through each of these thrones, not in theory, but as living realities. Not in fancy language, but in words that your body, your ego, your spirit, and your soul can all understand. We'll start where most people are stuck, the body. Because before you can go higher, you have to start with what's closest to the ground. The body, where spirit meets gravity. Your body isn't just skin, bone, and blood. It's not just a thing you dress up, stretch, or feed. It's a throne. The first one. The closest to the earth, and it's where your entire human story begins. The body is the field where karma shows up. Where your lessons land. Where everything you haven't dealt with eventually makes itself known. A racing heart, a tight chest, a sickness that feels random, but somehow timed perfectly with your emotional burnout. You were never just born into a body. You entered into an agreement to live in gravity, to feel time, to experience contrast. The body is your teacher of contrast, light and shadow, tension and relief, hunger and satisfaction, pain and pleasure. It pulls your awareness downward into density, into the now. This isn't punishment. It's a sacred design. But here's the catch. The body can't lead your whole life. Left to itself, it runs on instinct, habit, repetition. Touch, avoid, want, withdraw. It reacts, it doesn't reason, it doesn't reflect. If you follow the body alone, you'll keep chasing comfort and avoiding pain. You'll crave, numb, overdo, repeat. But when you start watching your body without letting it take the wheel, something shifts. You begin to witness instead of just react. You feel a craving rise, and instead of obeying it, you ask, what's really underneath this? That's the beginning of embodiment, not just being in your body, but being aware inside it. Your body doesn't need to be controlled or punished. It needs to be honored. Listen to it. But don't let it make all the decisions. It will tell you when it's tired, when it's unsafe, when it's holding unspoken stories in the form of tight shoulders and clenched jaws. But it doesn't speak the full language of destiny. It doesn't know where your soul is going. That's why the deeper journey starts in not to worship the body, but to respect it enough not to let it rule. A body with no soul direction becomes a loop of stimulus and reaction. Eat, work, scroll, sleep, repeat. You were not meant to survive inside a loop. You were meant to grow inside a vessel. The body is your sacred vessel, not your master, not your enemy. When you start observing your posture, your hunger, your fatigue, not as random noise, but as signals, the body begins to soften. It stops screaming for attention and starts working with you. Pain begins to feel like a message, not just a problem. Fatigue becomes a teacher. Stillness becomes medicine. This is where spiritual awareness begins. Not in the sky, not in books, not on some mountaintop. Right here, in your breath, in your belly, in your bones. You can't skip the body and expect to evolve. Trying to ascend without grounding is like trying to light a fire without wood. The flame needs form, the soul needs a stage, and your body, your flawed, aching, beautiful body, is the first stage. So ask yourself, what stories is my body still holding? What patterns has it repeated for so long that I've stopped noticing them? What is it trying to say beneath the symptoms? This is how you step onto the first throne, not with force, but with presence. The body doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be heard. The ego, the mask that thinks it's the face. Not the version social media shames, not the cartoon villain that every spiritual book tells you to kill. The real ego, the one that quietly runs your life in ways you don't even notice. The ego is not your enemy, it's your boundary, your structure. The voice that says, this is me, and that's not. Without the ego, you'd have no identity. You wouldn't know where you end and the world begins. You wouldn't survive childhood, or even 5 minutes in traffic. The ego is the throne of self-definition. It forms early, shaped by your parents, your culture, your fears, your wins, your wounds. It's a storyteller, a meaning maker, a pattern matcher. And once it builds a story it believes will keep you safe, it clings to that story like it's the truth. Even if it's outdated, even if it hurts you. If your ego believes that being soft means being weak, it will harden every time you feel sadness. If it believes success equals worth, it will panic when you rest. If it believes love must be owned, it will chase approval and call it a connection. But here's the twist: the ego doesn't think it's lying. It thinks it's protecting you. It wants to make sure you're accepted, approved, and secure. So it edits your words. It downplays your desires. It builds a version of you that it believes will survive. And it wears that version like armor, sometimes even like a crown. But here's the danger. When the ego forgets that it's just a part of you, not the whole, it tries to take over. It becomes afraid of the soul, terrified of the spirit, and suspicious of silence. That's when ego turns into a dictator. It doesn't just guide. It controls. It doesn't just protect. It senses. It doesn't just compare. It competes. And worst of all, it starts to speak in your spiritual voice. It will say, this is your path, when really it means, this path keeps me in control. It will whisper, you're not ready, when really it means, I'm scared you'll change. This is what makes ego so tricky. It can sound wise, but it's actually afraid. It can look confident, but it's defending. It can perform spirituality while quietly resisting transformation. So what do you do with the ego? You don't destroy it. You educate it. You teach it how to serve instead of rule. You make it a bridge, not a wall. The healthy ego is not loud. It doesn't need to prove anything. It becomes the translator between your soul's guidance and your human experience. It knows its role, to protect, not to imprison. When the ego is in alignment, it doesn't resist mystery. It doesn't shut down in silence. It doesn't panic at change. It becomes flexible, clear, and humble. But when it's afraid, when it's stuck in a role, it no longer needs, it will fight. That fight looks like anxiety, perfectionism, control, judgment, people-pleasing, over-explaining, and resentment toward things you don't understand. And here's the hardest part, you won't always notice its ego. Because sometimes the ego doesn't feel arrogant. It feels tired. Quiet, like something in you just can't relax unless things feel certain. That's ego too. Your job isn't to shame it. It's to noticing it. To pause when it gets loud. To soften when it grips tight. And to remind it that you're not in charge anymore. You're safe even if you let go. This is what begins to unlock your deeper self. This is what creates space for the spirit to rise. The spirit, the fire that won't let you stay small. The spirit is not gentle. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It burns. The spirit is that spark that wakes you up at 2 a.m. with a strange sense that you're meant for more. It's the sudden clarity that hits when you least expect it. It's the pull you can't explain, toward a purpose, a person, a place, a path. While the body grounds you, and the ego builds your structure, the spirit sets you in motion. It's the flame inside your chest that refuses to die. The one that says, go, even when everything around you says, stay. It's easy to ignore the spirit. People do it all the time. We bury it under routine. We smother it with logic. We call it irrational or unrealistic. But here's the truth. The spirit is not interested in your comfort. It's interested in your becoming. Think of it as the breath of the divine inside you, not religious dogma, not belief, pure will, sacred drive, movement. The spirit doesn't care about your resume or your past mistakes. It cares about where you're going, about what's possible if you stop hiding and start living like you mean it. When the spirit is alive in you, you feel unstoppable, inspired, brave, even dangerous, but in the best way. You take risks. You break cycles. You speak truths you once swallowed. But there's a flip side. When the spirit is blocked or ignored, life feels gray. You wake up tired, even after sleeping. You scroll endlessly, chasing some spark that never comes. You say things like, I don't know what I want anymore, or I feel stuck. That's not laziness. That's spiritual suffocation. And if you only listen to the ego, it'll tell you to play safe, to wait for the right time, to get one more certificate, one more opinion, one more guarantee. But the spirit doesn't wait. It doesn't do safe. It moves in symbols, feelings, heat, and knowing. It wants you to leap, even when the bridge isn't built yet. In ancient teachings, the spirit was called the solar flame, the light of the divine sun burning inside human hearts. It was honored as a force of power, clarity, and evolution. But it was also feared. Because fire doesn't just warm you, it burns what no longer belongs. That's why the ego resists it. Because once the spirit awakens, everything false begins to fall apart. Old roles, old masks, old attachments gone. And that collapse can feel like a crisis. But it's not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. Still, fire without guidance can destroy. If you follow the spirit without anchoring it in soul and ego, you might burn out. You might leap before you're ready. You might confuse chaos with transformation. That's why spirit needs to be held, contained, not controlled, but partnered. The ego must learn to hold the fire without choking it. The soul must offer timing, context, and depth. And when all three align, body, ego, and soul, the spirit becomes divine action. It's not about moving fast. It's about moving truth. The spirit doesn't want you to be perfect. It wants you to be alive. So ask yourself, what truth have I been too afraid to speak? What dream keeps showing up no matter how often I ignore it? Where is my fire trapped, and what would happen if I set it free? This is the throne of motion, of clarity, of sacred disruption. If the soul is the map, the spirit is the vehicle. And next, we'll sit with the soul, the oldest, quietest, deepest part of you. The soul, the memory that was you before you were born. The soul doesn't shout, it doesn't push or persuade, it doesn't panic when you're lost, it just waits. Always there, always watching, always remembering who you really are. Long before you had a name or face, you were soul, not an idea, not energy, you were memory, ancient, alive, a thread woven through lifetimes, carrying everything you've ever been and everything you came here to become. Your soul chose this life, this body, this family, this exact mix of beauty, trauma, timing, and terrain. Not randomly, not as punishment, but with surgical precision. Because your soul knows what it's here to learn, and what it's here to give. It holds the blueprint of your evolution. Not just your goals or desires, but your real purpose. The energy you came here to anchor. The truth only you were meant to carry. The soul is the deepest throne, and the hardest to access. Because it doesn't speak English. It doesn't care about being understood. It speaks in symbols. In dreams. In moments that hit you so hard you stop breathing. In the strange pull you feel towards certain people, places, or paths, even when they don't make sense. That's your soul recognizing something it already knows. You can't think your way into the soul. You feel your way there. And it usually takes silence, stillness and space. That's why so many people miss it. Because the world is loud. Because the ego is busy. Because the spirit is moving fast. And because the soul will never compete for attention. When the soul speaks, it sounds like, I've been here before. This feels like home. I don't know why, but this matters. It's subtle, but when it hits, it's unmistakable. And once you've heard it, truly heard it, everything else starts to feel hollow. But the soul is not emotion. It's not your mood. It's not every deep feeling or dramatic intuition. It's deeper than all of that. Because emotion can belong to the body. Drama can belong to the ego. Impulse can belong to the spirit. The soul is still. It doesn't react. It witnesses. It guides. It remembers. In old mystical traditions, the soul was called the immortal mirror because it reflects both your unique human story and your eternal divine essence. You're not just a person living a life. You're a soul living a purpose. And here's the wild part. Some souls carry a very old assignment. They are not just old souls. They are primordial carriers. They came at the beginning. They've walked through thousands of years of form, light, shadow, and silence. These souls awaken early. They feel deep grief without reason. They are drawn to mystery, to truth, to the places no one else wants to go. Their lives are not easy, but they are rich, heavy with meaning, charged with purpose. And maybe you're one of them. You've always felt different. You've always known something was off, not wrong, just incomplete. And you've been looking for something that has no name. That ache is soul memory. And this moment, even reading this, may be part of your remembering. But don't rush it. The soul moves slow. It works in lifetimes, not deadlines. It chooses depth over speed. That's why the soul often feels like it's waiting, because it is. It's waiting for the ego to soften, for the spirit to settle, for the body to quiet down, and for you to get still enough to hear its voice again. When you do, it's like the center of you comes home. The conflict, when the thrones start arguing. Inside you, there's a war that nobody sees. Your body wants comfort. Your ego wants control. Your spirit wants freedom. Your soul wants truth. Each one pulling in a different direction. Each one is convinced it knows what's best. This conflict isn't dysfunction. It's being human. You are not one voice. You're a conversation. A system of thrones, each with a purpose, a personality, and a way of protecting you. But when you don't know who's speaking, you end up living on autopilot, chasing what you don't need, avoiding what you do, and wondering why nothing feels quite right. Ever felt totally sure about a decision, only to second-guess it later with crushing doubt? Ever thought, this is my purpose, but then felt anxious, rigid, or burnt out trying to chase it? That's not confusion. That's a conflict between thrones. One of the most common and dangerous traps is when the ego hijacks the voice of the soul. It sounds like this. This is my calling, when really it's, this validates my identity. The ego starts wearing a spiritual mask. It talks like the soul, but acts from fear. It says all the right things about growth, purpose, healing, but secretly clings to its old stories of control, recognition, and safety. And you can feel it, even if you can't explain it. There's a tightness in the chest, a rush of urgency, an anxious need to keep things from falling apart. That's the giveaway. The soul feels still, expansive, wise. It doesn't rush or force. It doesn't need to prove anything. The ego feels urgent. It clings. It defends. It narrates everything as if it's fighting for survival. And when the ego is afraid of losing control, it gets louder, not wiser. That's when people fall into spiritual performance. They post wisdom, but avoid stillness. They talk about healing, but never slow down. They chase peak experiences, but run from the quiet truth of themselves. The soul doesn't compete. It steps back and waits. And it will wait as long as it takes, until the ego learns humility. And usually, that humility comes through collapse, heartbreak, burnout, and loss. Moments when the ego realizes it's not in control and never really was. Another deep conflict? The spirit versus the soul. Both divine, but they operate on different clocks. The spirit is fast. It moves. It transforms. It wants to bend through the old and leap into the new. It says, now, let's go. The soul is slow. It remembers. It integrates. It says, wait, there's more to learn here. If you follow only the spirit, you might jump into things without foundation. Start projects and abandon them. Pursue enlightenment experiences, but feel empty afterwards. That's the fire of the spirit burning faster than the soul's rhythm can sustain. Real alignment happens when the soul and spirit agree. When the fire burns in the right direction, at the right time, then movement becomes destiny. Not just speed, but purpose. Not just action, but alignment. And let's not forget the body in all of this. Sometimes, the body gets caught in the crossfire. The spirit wants to move. The soul wants to wait. The ego wants to plan. Meanwhile, your body is tense, tired, and unsure whom to follow. That's why the body starts screaming through fatigue, illness, restlessness. Not because it's broken, but because it's overwhelmed. And the final, most fragile tension? The ego's fear of the spirit. The spirit is wild. It's impulsive, liberating. It breaks rules, burns bridges, and doesn't ask for permission. The ego thrives on predictability. It needs roles, routines, and control. So when the spirit starts rising, the ego goes into defense mode. It distracts you with doubt, sedates you with comfort, surrounds your fire with logic and fear. It'll whisper, "Who are you to do that? You're not ready. What if you fail?" But when the spirit finally breaks through, when it lights up that fire again, the ego has two choices: evolve or suffer. And that moment, That's the turning point in every real awakening. The alignment. When the thrones remember who they are. You're not broken. You're complex. What you've been calling confusion, burnout, or not feeling like yourself is often just misalignment. 4 voices speaking at once. Each of them is important. None of them meant to lead alone. This is the art of inner alignment, letting each throne take its rightful place. Not by force, but by clarity. Because when you know who's speaking, when you can pause and ask, is this my ego talking? My soul? My spirit? Everything shifts. The body? It grounds you. It reminds you that you're alive, that you matter here and now. But it's not your compass. It listens best when you slow down, breathe, and feel instead of flee. The ego, it gives you shape. It helps you move through the world without falling apart. But it needs to be guided, not obeyed. It's at its best when it's humble, when it serves rather than rules. The spirit, it's your fire. It gets you unstuck. It pushes you to speak the truth and leap into the unknown. But it must be channeled. Not suppressed, not unleashed recklessly, but honored and directed. And the soul? The soul is the deep sea beneath it all. It remembers who you really are, not the version you perform, not the version you protect, but the version you've always been. Alignment doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean becoming a flawless, enlightened being. It means becoming honest. Still enough to hear. Wise enough to wait. Brave enough to act. Most people are ruled by one throne and cut off from the others. Some live entirely in the body, chasing comfort, escaping pain. Some live in the ego, overthinking, performing, defending. Some live in the spirit, starting fires they can't contain. And some try to live only in the soul, floating above life, avoiding the mess of being human. But wholeness requires all 4. That's the real secret. The body keeps you rooted. The ego gives you structure. The spirit gives you momentum. The soul gives you meaning. When they work together, you begin to move with real power. Grounded but visionary, humble but fierce, clear but open. This is what it means to return to yourself. To sit on all 4 thrones. To live from the center of your being instead of the noise of your fear. So if you felt lost, pulled in every direction, numb or overwhelmed, you're not failing. You're waking up. Now the work begins. To listen deeper. To choose wiser. To move more slowly. To trust faster. To let the ego bow. To let the spirit rise. To let the soul remember. And to let the body soften. Because you are not just a body. Not just a story. Not just a flicker of fire. You are a system of thrones. Each one sacred. Each one is waiting to be reclaimed. This is not the end. This is your return. If this stirred something in you, don't scroll past it. Like, subscribe, share, and tell us which throne have you been ignoring.